Objection!
Complexity is normally a trait that is reserved for a few select characters within a story. It's not something that's simply handed out to every character there is, and that's mainly because it takes a lot of time and effort to flesh a character out enough for them to be considered complex. As a result of that, true complexity is usually reserved for a story's main characters because they're the ones that the story is centralized around. It's not as if the less important characters are given no depth, but they are always overshadowed by their more important counterparts by default. When it comes to Ace Attorney, this ideology remains true, and that makes perfect sense when one considers the structure of the game's stories. Like most stories, the games prefer to focus on the development and growth of their main characters, while the characters around them serve to assist them, act as obstacles, provide comedic relief, or something else entirely. This is most commonly the case for the game's witness characters, as they typically remain chained to one specific case and simply serve to impede the player. But it can also be the case for some recurring characters as well. These are typically the types of characters that return either to contribute to the main character's development or to simply provide comedic relief, but they often do little to go beyond that. Don't get me wrong, I love characters like Larry Butts and Lotta Hart just as much as the next guy, but I think it would be hard to argue that those characters undergo significant character development throughout the series. They certainly do grow in some ways, sure, but overall, Larry will always be Larry and Lotta will always be Lotta. However, despite everything that I have just said, there are exceptions to everything. Because every now and then, Ace Attorney will introduce a character that seems shallow upon first glance, but that is then able to grow and develop in ways that the player likely didn't expect. Which transforms a character that was seemingly one note into a genuinely complex character not so different from the game's main characters. And out of all of these characters, I believe that none among them hold a candle to Ace Attorney Investigation 2's own Eustace Winner, who has become a fan favorite for displaying some of the greatest character development in the series. But how did this happen? How did a character that originally came off as one note transform into one of Ace Attorney's greatest characters of all time? Well, that's exactly what I'm here to answer today. So join me as I delve into how Eustace Winner went from comedic relief to one of Ace Attorney's very best. Let's begin. When players first encounter Eustace Winner in the Captive Turnabout, he's introduced as a bumbling buffoon of a prosecutor who's incapable of making even the simplest deductions. To say that the kid is dim-witted would be a massive understatement, as he struggles to even spell out certain words correctly, and at no point actually contributes to a case's progression during his initial appearances. Despite his lack of competence, Eustace is incredibly confident in his own abilities, obsessed with being a winner in all possible capacities. He's positive that he's a prosecutor extraordinaire who's superior to Edgeworth in every way, even though it's blatantly obvious that he's just about as far away from being that as he could possibly be. This contrast between what Eustace believes himself to be and what he actually is a classic character trope in fiction, because it creates plenty of funny, memorable moments where the character in question attempts to flaunt their own skills as much as possible, and fails miserably at doing so because they don't actually have any real skills to flaunt. This is symbolized pretty bluntly in Eustace's own name. Ace Attorney is pretty infamous for its delightfully stupid pun names, but even with that in mind, Eustace Winner, which is a pun meaning useless winner, is an incredibly blatant and ridiculous name for a character who thinks he's the best at everything and is really the best at nothing. And the sheer absurdity of this character is even further cemented in his theme, titled Eustace Winner, Winning Deductions. Much like Eustace himself, this theme provides a great deal of contrast with his self-proclaimed greatness by being a dorky, pathetic little flute tune that gives off the vibe of an inexperienced novice. Given Eustace's aesthetic as a conductor, I get the impression that this theme is meant to represent the exact piece of music that he himself would compose and claim is a masterpiece. This theme even plays in place of the standard cross-examination theme when Eustace first presents his argument to Edgeworth, which immediately cements the fact that it holds little to no value whatsoever. Now, this all culminates in a character that is, quite frankly, impossible to take seriously. But just in case there was even a sliver of a chance of the player showing any interest in him due to him seemingly assuming the role of the rival character in Investigations 2, then that interest is quickly shattered by the introduction of Verity Gabel. As Investigation 2's true rival character, Verity immediately commands presence in ways that Eustace couldn't hope to. As a judge and a member of the Committee for Prosecutorial Excellence, she immediately poses a threat to Edgeworth and makes it clear to both him and the player that she fully intends on being a thorn in both of their sides. As a result of this dominant display of competence and authority, Verity Gabel almost immediately overshadows Eustace Winner in just about every way, brushing him aside and reducing him even further to little more than a joke. There is the lingering question of why Verity chooses to accompany Eustace during his investigations and treats him as if he truly is the prodigy that he claims to be, but the intrigue of that mystery falls entirely on her, once again disregarding Eustace himself from being a character of any real value. The only real mystery surrounding Eustace himself is how he landed the position of prosecutor in the first place, but that question is more played up for laughs than it is genuinely explored during the first 2 cases that he features in. All of this combines to create a character that feels just about as irrelevant as any other throwaway character in Ace Attorney. He has his gimmick, that being his perceived greatness and his apparent incompetence, and that gimmick is what defines him. He doesn't learn from his mistakes, he doesn't grow, he just simply performs his shtick and then fades into the background so that Verity can take the center stage. Whenever he is around, characters are quick to shut him up because they already know that he has nothing worthwhile to say and is instead just there to waste time. They're constantly insulting him and commenting on just how incompetent he truly is, while Eustace himself seems entirely oblivious to his own incompetence. To that end, it can honestly become easy for the player themselves to become annoyed with Eustace, because all he really serves to do is halt progress from being made with his pointless shenanigans. Though if the player isn't entertained by those shenanigans, then they're likely to groan whenever he appears on screen. And so, for the entirety of the Captive Turnabout and Turnabout Legacy, Eustace Winner serves as nothing more than a gimmick character. A character designed to waste time with his needless remarks before being swiftly pushed aside so that the real characters can get back to business. Though to be quite frank, there isn't much more to discuss here because the core of what Eustace Winner is within the first 2 cases that he features in is relatively simple. And that was done very intentionally, as it gives the player the impression that they already know everything there is to know about the character, which perfectly sets them up to be blown away in the game's 4th case, a Turnabout Forsaken. Now, up until this point, Eustace Winner has been a character with little to no depth. He's been presented as a dopey, oblivious prosecutor who believes he's the best at everything, but is really incapable at anything. However, all of that completely changes when a certain man makes his appearance during a Turnabout Forsaken. That character is Eustace Winner, chairman of the Committee for Prosecutorial Excellence, and to quote him directly, father to this idiot boy. And unlike his son, Eustace Winner is a man that immediately demands presence. It's abundantly clear that he holds the most authority over the case by far, and that level of power makes him noticeably arrogant. He's constantly berating everyone around him, fully aware of the fact that no one is in any position to stop him from doing so. But interestingly, the one that he insults the most is his own son, Eustace. To put it simply, Eustace is an absolute jerk to Eustace, which in some ways is gratifying to players who have grown to become just as aggravated with him as Eustace seems to be, but in other ways, it can be easy to feel bad for the poor kid, because it's immediately made clear that Eustace really looks up to his dad and is eager to win his favor, so to see him get rejected by him in such a harsh way is honestly kind of brutal. This is an entirely new side of Eustace that adds a layer of depth to his character that wasn't previously present. This is further enhanced by the duality between the 2 characters. In many ways, Eustace Winner is the exact opposite of his son. While Eustace is a complete failure of a prosecutor, Eustace is a man who has ascended to the very peak of the profession. While Eustace's overconfidence is in direct contrast with his actual talent, Eustace is a man whose arrogance is clearly well-founded. It's an interesting dynamic that makes the 2's relationship even more noteworthy. This symbolism is further enhanced by both characters' names. Eustace Winner is a man who, by means fair or foul, has earned his title as the chairman of the Committee for Prosecutorial Excellence, and his first name pretty blatantly reflects that status. Conversely, while Eustace did inherit his father's last name of Winner, his first name symbolizes how he's done nothing to earn it. He is by definition a useless winner. A winner by definition, but not one that can provide anything genuinely useful. And while both of these names are still very ridiculous, the fact that the developers were able to add that extra layer of depth to these characters through them is quite notable to me. Overall, the introduction of Eustace Winner communicates that there very well may be more to Eustace's character than what initially met the eye. And as the case continues and it becomes increasingly apparent that Eustace himself is responsible for the murder being investigated, that intrigue only grows more and more. Despite the way that his father treats him, it's clear that Eustace still looks up to his dad a lot. So when Edgeworth attempts to accuse Eustace of murder, Eustace is the first one to come to his aid. Verity initially does this as well, but she soon reveals that she had been planning to expose Eustace for quite some time, explaining why she had been keeping close to Eustace in the first place. Despite the doubt beginning to take shape in his heart, Eustace continues to believe in his dad. But as the case progresses further and further and more evidence begins to point towards him, Eustace becomes unsure of what to even think. This all culminates in Eustace lashing out at his son, with his demeaning and belittling insults becoming worse than ever before. Eustace pleads with him, telling him that he did everything he could throughout his life to make him proud, graduating at the top of his class and becoming a prosecutor all so that he could be just like him. Eustace fires back by revealing that he personally rigged all of the classes and competitions that Eustace participated in, and telling him that if he never realized that, given his lack of talent, then there's no hope for him. This bombshell of a reveal finally explains why Eustace Winner is the way that he is. Simply put, he's a nepo baby. A boy who didn't earn a single one of his achievements because his father cheated him out of doing so, seemingly for the sole purpose of fueling his own twisted ego. But once Eustace realizes that doing so robbed Eustace of becoming a genuinely competent prosecutor, he denounces him as his son and tosses him aside as he sees no point in having a son that can't feed into his ego further. And in response to this revelation, all Eustace can do is run away crying. This entire exchange was mind-blowing to me during my first playthrough because it completely transforms Eustace from an annoying nuisance to a genuinely sad character. And it makes Eustace Winner look even more diabolically evil than he already was. All his life, all he had ever wanted to do was be just like his dad. But due to his dad's own tampering, he was never granted the opportunity to grow and learn in the ways that he could have, that he should have. And once his father didn't have a use for him anymore, he was discarded, depriving him of his only true purpose in life, to impress his father. Throughout the game, Eustace had been prancing around like he was the best prosecutor there is because he genuinely thought that he had earned the right to do so. So to have his entire reality shattered by the person he cared about most is a gut-wrenching feeling. Unsurprisingly, Eustace Winner is nowhere to be found for the remainder of the case, and while Edgeworth and crew were able to successfully convict Eustace Winner for his crimes, the damage to his son's mental state has been done. And with there being only one more case in the game, there's no way of knowing what, if anything, will happen to Eustace from here on out. All players can do is trudge on and see what Capcom has in store for the poor boy in Turnabout for the Ages. As Turnabout for the Ages begins and Edgeworth begins investigating the murder of Di-Jun Wang, he's forced to take a small intermission from his investigation in order to observe the trial of Fifi Lagarde, the culprit from the captive Turnabout. What's noteworthy about this particular trial is that Eustace Winner was supposed to prosecute the case, while the victim from A Turnabout Forsaken, Rosie Ringer, was meant to act as the defense attorney. However, thanks to the efforts of Eustace Winner, both parties are missing, leaving Franziska von Karma and Eddie Fender respectively to take over. To make matters worse, Eustace has supposedly kidnapped Verity Gavel's adopted son, Sean Fenn, in order to blackmail her into granting Lagarde a not guilty verdict, which is something that she's more than capable of doing as the judge presiding over the case. Edgeworth resolves to search for Sean while Franziska and Eddie stall as much as they can, leading him to Eustace's own garage. However, what he finds there is not a kidnapped Sean Fenn, but a kidnapped Eustace Winner. As it turns out, Eustace's men ended up mistaking Eustace for Sean, leaving him bound and gagged in his own home until Edgeworth finally arrives to save him. To say that Eustace has been through a lot at this point would be a gross understatement, so Edgeworth resolves to talk things out with him via some chess-themed therapy. Throughout this mind chess segment, players get to learn about how Eustace is at an all-time low following the abandonment and sequential kidnapping at the hands of his dad. He explains to Edgeworth how he believed that if he became the world's best prosecutor, then his dad would finally accept him for who he is. And not once did he ever stop to consider what he himself personally wanted. He feels as if he has lost all purpose, and he doesn't know what to do with himself anymore. He's incredibly distraught, signified by him obtaining a new sprite where tears are pouring down his face. The self-confidence that he once held is gone, and what's left is an onslaught of self-doubt and intrusive thoughts telling him that no one likes him. When placed in combination with the scene where Excelsius lashes out at Eustace from the previous case, this scene practically forces the player to feel a level of empathy for Eustace that they had likely not felt before. It changes their perspective of him completely, and shifts them from praying for him to go away to genuinely wanting him to find his way and succeed. And this is an emotion that Edgeworth finds himself feeling as well, as he's the one that pushes Eustace to believe in himself and carve his own path forward. One that is entirely his own, not for the sake of another, but for himself. This once again causes him to run away crying, leaving Edgeworth with no choice but to return to Lagarde's trial without him or Sean Fenn. And when he does, Excelsius Winner is on the stand, suspected of concealing evidence related to the case, which he is absolutely guilty of doing. Despite this, he still holds all the cards in this situation, making things rather dire. However, just when it seems as if all hope is lost, someone special interrupts. Eustace Winner makes his reappearance, and as he does, he's immediately berated by almost everyone in the courtroom for abandoning his duty as a prosecutor. And at the helm of this verbal assault is Excelsius himself, who attempts to taunt Eustace in order to intimidate him. But despite all of the insults being thrown his way, Eustace holds his tears, bravely looks his father dead in the eyes, and announces that he has vital evidence to present to the court. And as he does this, there are two significant details to note. One, Eustace uses a brand new sprite in this moment, where he proudly faces his opponent as a single tear leaves his eye. This sprite showcases emotions that had not previously been showcased in Eustace's previous sprites, allowing it to showcase an immense amount of character development. It demonstrates just how far he's come and shows that he's prepared to take his father head on. To accompany this shift in attitude, Eustace's second theme begins playing for the first time, titled Eustace Winner, Winning Independence. And while his previous theme was a simple flute tune meant to symbolize his incompetence, this theme is an orchestral arrangement that makes it feel as if Eustace has finally found his way, not only as a prosecutor, but as a composer as well. Both of these elements make up some of the best examples of visual and musical storytelling in the series, with both proudly representing Eustace's transformation. But none of this would matter if Eustace's actions didn't warrant them, so sure enough, Eustace assumes his rightful place at the prosecutor's bench together with Edgeworth so that they can take down Excelsius once and for all. As it turns out, Eustace went digging through the garbage dump to locate a piece of evidence that Excelsius discarded. And while he didn't find exactly what he was looking for, the traces on what he did find were enough to seal both Excelsius and Lagarde's fates once and for all. And suddenly, in almost the blink of an eye, players find themselves rooting for a character that they were actively rooting against for the entire game. His powerful display of confidence combined with the pure evil of his father pushes them to believe in him just as Edgeworth does. Edgeworth himself gets to assume the role of the mentor character in this scenario, allowing him to guide Eustace down the path of a prosecutor and show him the way forward. In many ways, he acts as the father figure that Excelsius failed to be, creating a very impactful dynamic between the two characters. This is a staggering shift because it doesn't just change the player's perspective of Eustace, but completely recontextualizes everything that they knew about him to transform him into a genuinely compelling and inspiring character. Yet at the same time, it doesn't feel completely out of left field. Instead, it feels like a natural progression of Eustace's character that makes perfect sense given everything that the player knows about him. At no point does his likability feel forced onto the player. Instead, the player is organically led to the point where they naturally grow to like him, and his character development feels earned. In this scene, Eustace is not the annoying character that he once was. He's a boy who's fighting for his independence so that he can become his own person. And the drive that he has to do so is inspiring enough to make players cheer him on and fight with him until the bitter end. As Edgeworth and Eustace back Excelsius into a corner, Excelsius refuses to admit defeat at the hands of his own son, telling Eustace that he doesn't stand a chance without him around, that he won't last even 5 minutes out in the real world. In response, Eustace says this.
You know what? I think I might be okay. All I ever wanted was to become a prosecutor, to make you proud. But after your men kidnapped me and I was lying there in the dark all on my own, I got to thinking how powerless I was in all of this because of you. I almost gave up. I almost lost sight of the truth. But then Edgeworth appeared out of nowhere and showed me the way forward. I don't need your approval anymore, and I don't need you. After all, I found that evidence on my own, didn't I? I know you hated me for as long as I can remember, but I want you to know that despite it all, I've always looked up to you as my dad. Thanks for everything, Excelsius. And goodbye.
This entire sequence was simply mind-blowing for me during my first playthrough. From the use of visual and musical storytelling to the intense confrontation, to the impactful farewell, all of it serves to completely revolutionize Eustace Winner's character as a whole. What began as a noticeably one-note character soon blossomed into a boy that learned to carve his own path in life, severing himself from his abusive father in order to be the best prosecutor that he could possibly be. Not as a result from his father's interference, but by his own merits. What is displayed in this scene isn't just Eustace cornering Excelsius. It's also a showing of Eustace growing up. It's a showing of him finding independence and believing in himself for the first time. The Eustace Winner shown here is not the whiny brat that he once was, but a kid that has grown up and is ready to take on the world all by himself. This is especially apparent in his final farewell to Excelsius, where, despite how horrible he's treated him throughout his life, Eustace doesn't address him with the scorn and disdain that one would, quite frankly, expect from him at this point. Instead, he simply thanks him for all he's done and treats him with the mutual respect that he doesn't deserve. This is all symbolized by the fact that he addresses Excelsius by his actual name for the first time, definitively showing that he's ready to let go of him and move on to being a better person. This isn't the jaded farewell of an irrational child. It's the respectful, mature farewell of an adult who is truly ready to let go of his past. This scene doesn't just simply redeem Eustace Winner. It takes him from comedic relief to one of the greatest examples of character growth in the entire Ace Attorney series, and one of the greatest characters in the series as a whole. Eustace Winner is one of the most fascinating characters in the Ace Attorney series to me because he defies the standard that had been set from the very beginning. As I stated at the beginning of this video, the level of complexity that he demonstrates is not something that is given out freely. It's usually reserved for the game's main characters. And to make things stranger, out of all the recurring characters that could have potentially gained significant character development in Ace Attorney Investigations 2, Eustace might have been the least likely candidate out of all of them. The character archetype that he initially follows is not one that's unique to him. In fact, several characters that came before and after him follow a similar trend of having their one gimmick and sticking to it for the most part. This means that as soon as Eustace Winner is introduced to players that had played previous Ace Attorney games, which I'm assuming is practically every player, they already have a preconception about the way his character is going to pan out. The introduction of his father throws a wrench into this preconception, demonstrating one of the many examples of how Ace Attorney Investigation 2 is different from any other game in the series. However, even with that in mind, I don't think anyone could have predicted the impact that Eustace Winner ultimately left on players during his final confrontation against Excelsius. Through this finale, he was able to surpass any expectations that could have possibly been placed on him and cement his place as a fan favorite character. And I don't use the phrase fan favorite lightly, as through this scene, Eustace Winner has become one of, if not the single most popular original character from Investigations 2, which is saying a lot because he has some steep competition. And yet, I feel that this reputation is entirely deserved, because no other character is as deceptively complex as Eustace Winner. There have been a handful of characters throughout the series who emulate his character arc to some degree, but overall, no character has been able to pull it off in quite the same way that he did. He is truly unique. And despite what he may have initially led players to believe, he's a real winner. Thank you for watching, and be sure to let me know what your take on Eustace Winner is down in the comments below. And while you're down there, consider hitting the subscribe button for more deep dives into all things Ace Attorney. For now though, that's all from me. Take care of yourselves.